Construction on the city's defenses began when Theodosius was 12 years old. It was his prefect, Anthemius, who was the real mastermind. Romans had been building walls for hundreds of years, but the Byzantine engineers faced an even greater challenge. Constantinople sat on a fault, and earthquakes were a constant problem. They had to build with something that would withstand a tremor. The answer was limestone mortar.
In the West, Romans used concrete, which created a mortar of stone-like hardness that is rigid once it sets. Lime mortar has a little bit of give to it, so that it will allow the buildings to settle without significant breakage.
The Byzantines' ingenious design used limestone mortar alternated with bands of brick and stone. First, square stone walls were laid and filled in with brick, rubble and mortar. Then, to bind the layers of stone and mortared rubble together, bands of brick, 5 courses thick, were laid throughout the width of the walls.
The hidden advantage of that also is that it provides a certain flexibility against minor earth tremors, because the addition of the brick breaks up the solid face of the wall and allows the wall to absorb shock without shattering.
Using this layer technique, the Byzantines constructed a massive line of defense, more than 30 feet high and 16.5 feet deep, interspersed with 96 towers, 60 feet high. But would it be enough to hold back the Huns?
General William Tecumseh Sherman said about the Comanche Indians, the best equestrians of latter years, that they'd been on a horse for so long it looked like they didn't know how to walk. Well, the Huns were the granddaddies of the Comanche. They lived, breathed, and died by the horse. They developed the stirrup, which allowed them to stand up in the saddle and sling arrows and swords with a deadly accuracy. They rode from China to India to Europe, plundering and terrorizing, feasting on raw meat, which they tenderized between their thighs as they rode, dressed in the skins of field mice, which they wore until those skins rotted off. Let me put it this way. Attila and the Huns gave a new meaning to the word fierce.
He was very good at what he did. He was very good at raping and pillaging and breaking down the defenses of the Roman Empire.
In the first 7 years of his reign, much of Europe fell to Attila and his Huns. Despite repeated attempts, Attila had yet to capture Constantinople. But in 447 AD, a series of catastrophic earthquakes rocked the city, far worse than anything Byzantine engineers had anticipated. It was the opportunity Attila had been waiting for. 57 towers were leveled by the tremors, leaving the city open and unprotected. Attila's army was once more on the march, threatening Constantinople. From the rubble, Emperor Theodosius rallied the city's people to help not only rebuild the defenses, but make them even more formidable than before. With the Hun army fast approaching, thousands of citizens had only weeks to repair walls that had taken years to build. The Byzantines took no chances. The new and improved Theodosian walls now incorporated a triple line of defense.
There must have been an enormous amount of planning, a lot of engineering skill. For its period, it was the most complex and expensive defensive system in the world outside of China.
The first hurdle, a giant moat. Beyond that, an outer terrace. Then a new outer wall, 10 feet high and 6.5 feet thick. The final and by far the most impressive line of defense was the original massive inner wall, completely rebuilt and anchored by its 96 giant towers.
Each tower is its own individual little castle. So to conquer the walls of the city, it would mean penetrating the moat, the outer walls, the inner wall, 3 lines of defense, and then conquering all of these individual castles one by one.
It's an extremely clever system. All the angles, all the possibilities for the technology of the time are covered.
The work was completed just in time. Attila's scouts crested a hill only to see the formidable fortress of Constantinople. Attila would never breach the Byzantines' capital city.
The city was secure because